Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm Will Gerling, sports and performance nutritionist, and we're finally talking about that topic of fat loss. Yes, we're going to go over all the ins and outs that you need to know on how to lose fat, to do it in the best way, the pros, the cons, the things that will help you and the things that don't really matter. So let's get into today's video and roll that intro. Yes, we're finally talking about fat loss. I've done many videos on my channel now, and this is going to be the first one really targeting and focusing on fat loss. I've looked at different studies like my high carb, low fat and high fat, low carb study, link in the corner. And I've also done intermittent fasting and ketosis and things that touch different ways of losing fat, but I've never done a specific video on it. So here we are with my specific video. It is going to be divided into 5 easy tips for you to think about for your fat loss. Tip number 1, calories. This is an obvious one and it is spoken about across the board, but you need to be in a calorie deficit if you want to drop body fat. Now, there is some leeway there. You can be in a bit of a calorie maintenance depending on the training that you're doing and how you're doing the ratios of those calories, but you need to be in a calorie deficit to be dropping body fat. That is the ins and out of everything. All diets in the sense of dropping body fat are equal. Ketosis, intermittent fasting, whatever you're doing, it needs to be in a deficit, because if you do ketosis and you're still in a calorie excess, you're not going to drop body fat. My first tip is a simple one. You need to be in a calorie deficit. How do we work that out? Well, it's very easy. You can get an RMR calculator, work out your RMR. That's your resting metabolic rate. You can then add your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or your NEAT levels, which we will come on to. You can then add your exercise expenditure, and then you can times that by the thermic effect of food, which is the amount of calories you essentially burn to break down the food you're eating. Once you have those all added together into our bowl of calories, you then need to add your deficit, or take those calories away for that deficit, and that's how many calories we should be having on a day. Now that obviously changes, which leads us on to my tip number 2. Periodize nutrition. In my last video, link in the corner, I spoke about periodized nutrition, about how you should divide your calories over a week based upon your training. And that's the same with this case. If we take that equation from our first tip, and then we actually did it for the different days that we do, so maybe during the week you do 1 hour through the week, and on the weekend you do 3 hours. You can work it out for each day. You can add them together, which gives you a total over a week. And then from that total, if we take away your deficit, which could be 2.5 to 3.5 to 4,500 calories, any of those really, there's a big range there. It's up to you. Depends how aggressive you want to be. Once we've taken that away, we can divide that through your week. So then we can divide it into a low day, a medium high day, which could be anywhere between 1 and 45 minutes to 90 minutes, 2 hours. And then a high day, which could be 2 hours plus. Now that's very generalized. Obviously, there may be days where you're doing 3 hours and then 6 hours. So you can't have the same high day for those. That's why people hire me. It gives you an idea to work from, because then you've got 3 different days that you can utilize and chop in and out depending on what you're doing. So that was top tip number 2, is to periodize your nutrition. Tip number 3, you need to know where you are to know where you're going to get to. So weighing yourself is obviously one way of doing that. You can use other measures like body fat, but most people use biometric impedance scales, which are pretty and notoriously inaccurate. And these are the scales where you stand on, it sends like a current through your body and assesses your body fat levels. Now it'll do this through hydration and carbohydrate storage, because it will differentiate between muscle, fat, but it doesn't do it too well depending on hydration level and so on. So if you have a lot of carbs in you and a lot of water, or the opposite, it will change the result. Weight is pretty easy, it's pretty consistent. You can do it every day, and it doesn't cost you a bomb to get some scales. If you do have someone doing skin folds and they are well trained, that is a potential as well. You can also, in conjunction, and this is what I do weight, do photos to allow you to assess body composition, and then also do circumference measurements, always taking out the same mark on the body. So that's how you're tracking your progress. Then also tracking your calories. We're talking about calories and being in a calorie deficit, but so many people don't track their food, and if they do, they don't even do it accurately. I think the biggest tip in this is that if you did 3 months of tracking your food and you tracked everything you ate, and it would tell you how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate you're having, as well as how many calories. If your weight is staying the same and you're doing the same amount of exercise, so let's say you do 10 hours a week and your weight is staying the same, and you're tracking your calories and you're eating on average, let's say 2,500 calories a day, and you're not losing any weight, then we know that your body fat isn't going down and you are not in a calorie deficit. To go alongside with tracking your weight, what I get the people that I work with to do is to do it daily. This is because it actually takes away from the importance of that weigh-in. If you focus too much on a weigh-in, it's really bad for your mental health. If you have one weigh-in a week and it happens to be up, that can be really demoralizing, can really upset you. A lot of people have a lot of poor relationship with their weight. So why would you want to put so much emphasis on one weigh-in? If you do a weigh-in every single day, it will account over a week for poor sleep, too much salt, dehydration, overhydration, late night of having a meal out, sodium retention, things like this. There's so many variables that affect your weight, which is why one weigh-in is pretty unreliable. But if you weighed in every single day of the week, then you're going to find that you get a trend, and it might zigzag up and down. But if it zigzags up and down but still comes down, then that trend line is still saying you're going in the right direction. And if you take that weekly average, and that weekly average from last week to this week, and this week is lower, you're in the right direction. But if it zigzags and it stays the same, or it just goes straight and stays the same every day, then you know, once again, that you're not in a calorie deficit. There are other variables that can come into these that make them a little bit more complex, but it's best not to worry about those because many of them don't apply to us, and then it's best to go to an expert to help you. If you have those variables, we have your weight, we have your exercise activity, and we have how much you're eating, these are the things that ultimately lead to you being in a calorie deficit. The last one is obviously your step count. And that leads us on nicely to our next point. Point number 4, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is essentially a really fancy word for how many calories you're expending doing everyday activity. This could be your job, this could be just walking around, which is why step count is a great way to track that. It could be you're a laborer, you're a builder, you do active work outside of your exercise, which is why it's non-exercise activity. But tracking that gives you another form of information to know. And if you combine that to the other 3 things, you've done 8,000 steps every day, your weight is staying the same, you're doing exercise of 10 hours a week, which is relatively the same kind of sessions and duration, and you're tracking your food, we know that you're still not in a deficit if your weight isn't going down at it. Or if it's going up, you're obviously in an excess and you're having too much. And if you keep your step count and your exercise the same, and then reduce the amount of calories you're having, you should go into a deficit. Or vice versa. If you up the amount of steps that you do, or up the amount of training that you do, I would do one of them, not both, then you should also go into a deficit if you eat the same amount of calories. It's that simple. Now, to follow both of those up, tracking can be quite hard mentally for a lot of people. And if you have a poor relationship with one, weighing yourself, or a poor relationship with food, and you have disordered eating tendencies or an eating disorder, then these probably aren't the best things for you to do. And there are other approaches that would apply best to you, but are not within the scope of this video. So if you are one of those people, then it may be best to not follow that tip. So we've gone over calories, we've gone over periodized nutrition, we've gone over tracking, weight and food, and then we've also gone over non-exercise activity. And my last tip for you out there is when you're dieting or trying to reduce body fat levels, you're obviously in a calorie deficit, which means you're eating less. But a lot of people still eat really high calorie dense foods. So having volume and having lots of food that are voluminous is going to help fill up your stomach, help you feel full, help you feel satiated, and it's going to curb any hunger pangs you might have whilst trying to reduce body fat levels. And there's a lot of ways you can do this, but the best and easiest one is just to have loads of fruit and veg. Vegetables are high in fiber, which are going to fill you up. It's low calorie for high volume for most things. You're going to be able to have a lot of food. It's going to increase your recovery. It's going to increase your antioxidants. It's going to increase your micronutrients, and it's going to help you fill you up. Too many people out there still, dieting and having sandwiches and things that are over really quickly. A sandwich is gone very, very quickly, and it's high calories. You know what? You're not gonna feel that full from it. Whereas if you had a bunch of grilled onions and grilled red peppers, and then with your rice, you made your own salsa. So you looked at some red onion, you looked at some tomatoes, coriander, lime juice, a bit of salt, things like this. You mix that all together, and then you mix that in to your rice. You've now created obviously salsa rice, and that's added bulk to that rice, and it's going to make you feel fuller, even though it's the same kind of thing. You've just added more flavor and more volume. So it's just going to be better for you, both nutritionally and satiety-wise. So there we have it. That is my 5 tips on helping you drop body fat. Now, we've covered a lot of areas onto how you actually drop body fat and what you need to be looking at, but these are only 5 tips of 15 that I actually have in an ebook that I've made. So if you head to the link down below and scroll down to the bottom of my website, you'll find a link there where you can just download my free ebook and get 15 tips on how you can help your fat loss and habits to do that. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And if you enjoy it, let me know. I'd love to know what you think. And the tips in there should give you everything you need.